Hey guys, this is PODFIC, and today we're going to be reading Alcatraz, but on hard mode by Sunny Blue. This is Chapter 4. The waves dull slightly, rolling out slowly, and it still hurts more than it did before, but it's a little better than a second ago, and he can definitely work with that. He does his best to relax his muscles and his jaw, tries to just focus on staying awake, and Jason certainly knows the drill, but he's clearly decided to shift to asking things that are easier for Tim to answer, which kind of leaves his friends in the dust because it's all shit that either pertains to the Wayne family, not that they know that, or random school-type trivia questions. Can you tell me what movie we watched last weekend? Mean Girls. Lil D hadn't seen it. And can you tell me what fell over in the middle of the movie? A bowl of M&Ms? Who wrote Frankenstein? Mary Shelley. Carried her husband's heart round with her. What a bad bitch. It's cooler than us. Agreed. Jason nudges him again, even more gently this time, but with the same vaguely loopy grin on his face. Third element on the periodic table? Beryllium? Try again. Lithium. Good. How many bats are there in the cave? 246. Wait, you actually counted? You didn't? Of course not. Trick questions are dumb. Jason gently rubs his thumb under Tim's eyes, and it feels so nice that Tim is really starting to wish Jason did do hugs. Yeah, but you're smart enough to call my bullshit, so it's all good. Not fair. Life isn't either replacement. Tell me what you had for breakfast this morning. Coffee. Jason sighs. Alright, that one doesn't count. Try, what did you tell me you saw on your way to school yesterday? Snake? Snake. Ain't that a quote from that John Green book? Jason says pensively. Tim snorts and subsequently groans, and Jason winces along with him. Oh, sorry, he says quietly. Tim expects him to say something like, too bad I'm so painfully hilarious. But in an incredible show of restraint, Jason actually holds back a witty/bitchy jab, and goes back to asking questions. What's the largest bird on Earth? You still smaller than bee? Jason purses his lips around a grin. Depends what armor he's wearing. Bats aren't birds, though. I need the largest bird. You. Answer Timbo. Ostrich. Puts his head in the sand. Kinda. What weapon does Nightwing fight with? A skirmish stick. Jay, we should use them to roast marshmallows. Tim, what the actual hood? A voice cuts painfully through the fog filling Tim's brain, and he peels his eyes open. I got a trail of gunshot wounds to follow here. Where are you? Tim grimaces at the sound echoing down the halls, giving it a metal edge that really doesn't feel good. Close your eyes, Red, Jason says, and Tim dutifully obeys, watching a bit of light filter through his eyelids. Jason's hands reappear on either side of his head, carefully covering his ears and blessedly muffling the nasty echo. Here! He calls, as quietly as he can while still ensuring that Dick hears him. And it still hurts Tim's head, but he's grateful for the buffer, so he does his best not to react. He can barely feel Dick sprinting forward through the floor, but that's totally normal because the guy's a freak. Against his better judgment, Tim squints his eyes open when he feels the small rush of air that tells him that Dick has come to an abrupt stop in front of the cell. And there he is, his oldest brother bearing his bright blue emblem and his marshmallow sticks. Taking a half a second to glance over the four long, silent, moderately shell-shocked boys in the back of the room before he's suddenly appearing by Tim's side, crouched onto one knee with one hand on Tim's chest and the other gently inspecting the dried blood covering the lower half of his face, which is still resting on Jason's lap. Tim suddenly realizes that, with Jason's hand covering his eyes, his friends would have spent the whole time seeing nothing but a grotesque and bloody smile, telling them shit they didn't know, like some off-brand Wizard of Oz. Yeah, he'll definitely have to apologize to them later. Right now, though, he can only kind of think straight. Still speaks English, though, and he's mostly just glad Dick is finally here. Tim blinks down, and Dick gives him a classic worry-pinched, I'm your mother now, smile. The Tim knows just about as well as the coppery taste in his mouth because those two tend to follow each other pretty well. Hey, bud, Dick says softly, somehow perfectly matching Jason's volume without having heard it. Still with us, baby bird? I'm here, Tim replies, but he really wishes he wasn't because he's tired and hurting and still on a fucking alien spaceship. Seriously, the jump to get from pre-Robin Tim Drake activities to post-Robin Tim Drake activities is pretty insane and impressive, but that never makes being stuck in deep space any less shitty. He hates that he can say that from experience. Dick smiles, a bit less worried this time, but still very much clinging to concern. Good. Hang in there. We'll be home soon. Dick gently brushes his fingers across Tim's forehead, but Jason's hand is still in his hair, and there are no bangs to push away, so it just feels like a soothing touch, and Tim can't say he minds. Tim's eyes are uncovered, so he can see and barely hear Dick as he whispers something to Jason, and Jason replies, and the two of them devolve into their standard oldest Robin methods of conversing. That makes very little sense to anybody other than them. The only thing he really catches is a hiss of, oh shit, those were only level 2? From Dick. which is understandable considering. Dick nods and looks back down at him with a grin. At least it's not too bad to get your ass kicked for making a sick escape. Don't think it was that sick, Tim mutters in response, glaring half-heartedly at his oldest brother. Ended up making me sick. He flicks his eyes in what he's pretty sure is the direction of his awesome little nosebleed escapade from earlier. And Dick follows his gaze and grimaces appropriately. That looks fun. Had a blast. Dick raises an eyebrow at him and huffs a small laugh at Tim's response, an incredibly fake smile before he finally spares more than a half second for the boys in the back. You guys okay? They're silent for entirely too long. Jason is rock steady. Haha, like Bebop. Wow, Tim is so tired. Beneath him, but he can feel Dick shifting awkwardly a few times through the endless, soundless hellscape. He isn't worried about it. It's such a tiny movement that there's no way anybody other than a bat could see it, but it's still funny, and Tim is totally gonna make fun of him for it later. Well, that is, he'll make fun of him for it 3 weeks from now when he's done sleeping. Dick's voice is edged with worry when he speaks again. Guys, are you all okay? Bart, eyeing his shocked teammates but carefully, bites his lip and leans forward to whisper theatrically, one hand held to the side of his mouth. They're just a little modded wing. Recently found out your familial ties and all. Dick's eyebrows draw in confusion. Tim is wondering if it's an insult to Frida Kahlo. If they decide they look like caterpillars again. He doesn't want to insult Frida Kahlo. He hopes she and Mary Shelley are hanging out being bad bitches together in the afterlife. Then he's got something to look forward to after he fucking dies of old age on this mothership, because they still haven't left yet. Oh my fucking god, he just wants to sleep. Recently found out? Dick says, and oh yeah, he was talking about something a second ago. Maybe they'll distract him long enough for Tim to steal the mother box from him and go the fuck home. Ditch his ass. That'll teach him to be so slow. Apparently, they didn't know you and your replacement are brothers. Jason supplies, ever helpful with his snarky tone, despite, you know. He glances at the R on the Robin suit and the Batbird on the Nightwing one, at the matching utility belts and the domino, at the incredibly close quarters position the three of them are sitting in literally right now, even though they don't really need to be. Yeah, Tim thinks he makes a fair point. Okay, yeah, but why didn't you tell us? Jamie finally sputters, and Dick relaxes a little with the knowledge that at least he's not brain dead. Dick and his caterpillar friends are still frowning. I assumed all of you know. It's not like we hide it. Lagan's eyes narrow suspiciously. But you bats are always so secretive and dark and brooding, and we're told to never ask you anything. Who knows what you could be hiding? The caterpillars have officially met. It's like Dick set them up on a blind date. Tim hopes they're happy together. Holy shit, he needs to stop. Who exactly told you to never ask us anything? Dick asks, while both his brothers are busy petting his hair and poking his face and generally being lovably annoying. Jason's hand hasn't yet returned to cover Tim's eyes, so he has a slightly clearer idea of what's going on. That said, he can't really see Lagan's face from this angle, but hearing the sneer in his voice tells him everything he needs to know. Superman himself, the boy says proudly. The brothers blink at each other once, twice, and then all three sets of eyes squeeze shut and exasperated groans resound from their chests. Lagan startles, but doesn't speak as the three of them immediately start bitching and moaning, talking over each other, quietly of course, as they complain more than explain about their apparent relationship with Superman. What a little bitch he is, Dick says, as madly interested as a person seeing a new variety of apple for the first time in a supermarket. I feel like we need to, call a meeting or something. To say what? Jason replies. He tips his head back to rest tiredly against the cell wall, which Tim knows is one of the most notable major differences between plant cells and animal cells, along with chloroplasts and a large central vacuole. Please let him sleep. Superman, you need to stop telling everyone we're total hardasses just because you think it's funny. Jason tried to make his voice exceedingly deep and rough, and it kinda sounds like an impression of Batman, but it also just sounds like a whale that gargled some gravel. How's that gonna go over with a guy whose entire sense of humor is literally just the phrase, "Hi hungry, I'm dad"? Tim can't stop himself from giggling, and the pain that radiates through his ribs and his skull really doesn't surprise him at that point. But he can feel Jason glaring, so he tries to shut up again. It sort of works, and I'll take that as a win. I bet he's trying to keep B's identity, cause if everyone thinks we're hard asses, nobody will notice that Mr. I Work Alone actually has a million kids running around breaking everything. Dick and Jason share the quietest ever burst of laughter, and then Dick says, "Okay, but we're not all exactly rays of sunshine either." He side-eyes Jason, who politely socks him in the shoulder, and Tim giggles and winces yet again. Dick rolls his eyes and looks back at Lagan. Superman is he's like our uncle. We've known him forever, and he tends to be a little more Outgoing? Then Batman. We mess with him, he messes with us, you know? Which is probably why he told you that. Also because it's true. Tim tumbles, and Jason socks Dick again, who responds with a dramatic whimper of, why me? But why does it matter that he's more outgoing than Batman? What about your parents? Virgil asks, and the brothers can't keep their disbelieving blinking from resurfacing. Do they really not know? What? Dick tries, stuttering, but he's really just so confused right now, and he sends Jason a grateful glance when he takes over. Batman is our parent. Silence. 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 You know, fuck their lives, man. What? Tim jerks and gasps, and his brothers immediately roll on the squad with something not quite like fury, but more like a genuine, remarkable range of pissed offness in their eyes. Well, Dick is pissed off anyways. There's always a little more weight to that anger when it comes to Jason, especially when it concerns Tim's well-being, and Tim knows it. He's not sneaky, and the looks are more than enough to silence the squad, although Bart is tapping his foot at 1,000 miles per hour, while sitting in the corner with his chin on his knees, eyes present but wishing they weren't. Dick glares at him and the tapping stops, and the boy meets his gaze, with his foot frozen halfway raised to make another tap. He could set his foot down, obviously, but the longer Dick looks at him, the longer it hangs in the air. Dick gives up and turns to where Jason is silently helping Tim settle down and breathes through it. He feels Dick's hand on his forehead, and he hears a hum that's pitched just high enough for him to know he has no fever, although he's not really sure why he would, given his injuries. His brothers can be, overprotective. Several moments after Tim has already calmed down, Jason goes to cover his eyes again, but Tim catches his hand with a frown. So his brother sighs and resigns himself to petting his hair. Tim knows he should probably have his eyes covered, yeah, but he still kind of wants to watch whatever this train wreck is that's still happening. Dick returns his focus to the boys. Yes, Batman is our father. The entire league and team know that too. Where have you guys been? Not you, he says, waving a hand at Virgil. You've barely had the time to meet everyone, but still. Is Superman, the only person you get info from? I mean, kinda? Jamie tries, and it comes out pretty solid. Good on him. After he told us not to ask you any questions, yeah. Jason's eyes are hidden behind his domino, but Tim can still tell that he's rolling them right now. Fine, we'll call a meeting. Can we maybe do that after we get home? Tim finally groans. His head and his ribs and his nose, and well, his everything hurts. And he's tired and cold, and it's been a long day, okay? Yeah, good call, Timmy. Dick mumbles, taking the mother box out of his utility belt. He looks up at the boys. Any last questions? He sighs wearily. Didn't realize people didn't know this stuff. I got one, Bart says quickly, because again, that's the way he does everything. Dick raises an eyebrow at him and apparently takes that invitation to prod a poking finger at the mother box. Where did you get that? I thought your bro here was kidding about you having one. Aren't there only 5 in the world? 3, actually. Dick corrects with a shrug. So there's plenty to go around, don't worry about it. Bart scowls and shakes his head. I think you guys might be hard asses. Tim grins, even though he can't really see any of them from this angle. Told ya, he mutters. And his brother's matching grin of response are probably the brightest things in the room, even though Dick is opening a boom tube at the entrance of the cell. Dick turns and helps Jason lift Tim carefully into his arms, and he passes his brother, and he pauses once his brother is secure, and a wave of pain has pressed to a feather-like kiss to Tim's temple, and squeezes Jason's shoulder with the one hand. He picks up Jason's discarded helmet with his other hand and nods. Let's get you home, baby bird, he mumbles softly, and Tim just smiles and rests his aching skull on Jason's chest. His brother holds him a little closer, even though Tim can feel his heartbeat against his cheek. He almost wants to laugh, to think that one day he'd be cradled in Jason Todd's arms, and listening to his heart as it actually beats in his chest. That he'd be there beside the real flying Dick Grayson, and feeling comforted by a kiss he pressed to his head. That here he is, and that he thinks of nothing but how glad he is to be home before they've even left the cell. No hero worship, no violence or cruelty separating them, no dead Robins, just brothers. Tim does laugh then, and winces, and laughs again at Jason's admonishment and winces, and eventually, finally, manages to chill the fuck out. Did he usually get so sappy when he's concussed? Dick ushers the others through the boom tube. Tim can see them gazing worriedly at him. They've probably never seen him with his guard so far down. Never seen him succumb to an injury this much, and they probably think that means it's really bad. But that's not it. It's just that there's a very few instances where Tim can afford to let his guard down, to let himself stay down from an injury. but this happens to be a pretty safe situation. And damn it if he's not going to soak it in while it's here, however brief. The moment Jason had removed his squad's restraints, Tim was safe. He could rest, let himself be taken care of, because he knew Jason would allow no harm to come to him, for at least the time it took to put himself back on guard. And that's about as close to safe as Tim Drake ever gets, so he'll take what he's given gladly. They emerge from the boom tube in Happy Harbor about a mile down the road from Mount Justice, and a bit out of the way, close to the woods where they wouldn't be spotted. Virgil raises an eyebrow. "Why didn't we just go directly into the mountain?" he asks. "About that," Dick says, and the boy sharpened to attention at the authority, very Nightwing edge to his voice. Jason, holding Tim, stands behind their older brother, slightly shielded from view. There was a brief period of time where he was brainwashed. He committed some crimes there he had no control over, but as a matter of privacy, we decided to keep a lot of the information in the family. So some of the league kinda still thinks he's a criminal, and we tried to avoid taking him into big league bases like the mountain because it becomes a hassle. But the team is all very familiar with brainwashing and mind control. He glanced at Jamie, who nods plainly while the others watch him. "So hope you'll all understand, when I ask you, as your leader, not to talk about the fact that you've seen him. That's not an order, that's your call, but I know you'll do the right thing." The boys all look at each other for several seconds, gazes bouncing around before they turn back to their leader and nod decisively. Bart Huston, that's all basically a lie. They're just trying to avoid mentioning Jason to older team members in case someone decides to come looking for a dead Robin. But he's not saying anything, and his acting is pretty damn good. Tim appreciates that. He smiles and gives a small wave. "You did good work today, guys. I'll see you soon." Virgil tweaks his head sideways before a smile covers his face too. "You too, Rob. And thanks for getting stout." Tim's brows are drawn together, suddenly realizing that he isn't entirely sure how Jason and Dick found them. "I didn't." Virgil nods knowingly. "Your emergency beacon. You hit it on your way to free me. It's a good call, squad leader." He looks up at Dick and further up at Jason, which will always be funny to Tim. "And thank you for getting this out too. It's cool to meet you, Bolt. Maybe I'll see you around." Jason glances at Dick before turning back to the kid. "You won't." Virgil smiles into a satisfied open grin and he chuckles. "I know. Never do." Jason blinks, looks down at Tim, his little brother held carefully in his arms, pale and injured, more than strong enough to hold his own and lead a team and kick the world's ass. He looks up at the kid, at Virgil, and can't help the small upward quirk of his lips. He nods a little awkwardly, but he thinks he understands. Dick eyes Jason up and down and lets a small smile slip easily onto his face. "Really," he says, turning to the squad. "Good work. But just so you know," he pauses for effect and they all stiffen just a little. "Lockpicking lessons start tomorrow." They relax a moment later, huffing small laughs and grinning at the scowl on Tim's face. He didn't even say anything to Dick. Less tense now, the squad says their goodbyes, wishes Tim a speedy recovery and starts off down the road towards the mountain, laughing and talking all the way. The brothers watch them go. Jason mumbles that maybe they aren't half bad. Tim is pleased with that, but is also beginning to nod off. He taps at Jason, who notices, and taps at Dick, who notices and opens another boom tube to the bat cave for the three of them to go through. The brothers are home. Alright guys, and that was the end of chapter 4 of Alcatraz but on hard mode by Sunny Blue. I hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you next chapter.